Welcome to Drupal Camp Asheville 2021, our 10th anniversary, which is super exciting. Again, virtually this year, but we hope to see all of our friends next year. Before we get started, I want to do a little bit of housekeeping. I want to remind folks that there is a code of conduct. You can find information about the code of conduct on the website, along with the front page of the Hopin. You'll find Alana and Avi's information. If you have any sort of code of conflict stuff, reach out to them, reach out to the organizers. And then we want to make sure that everyone understands that the code of conduct applies absolutely everywhere. If you happen to be in Asheville at the in-person events, it applies at the in-person events, and it definitely applies in our Drupal Slack space, in the Asheville camp space, in our Hopin chat space, and here in the room. And right now we have Rolando Scott. He is the Director of Development from TOT Creative, and I probably said that wrong, but I'm sure he'll correct me. He's going to talk about moving from development to manager or team lead, and talk about some of the growing pains that come along with that. So take it away, Rolando.
Thank you very much, Amy June. Thank you, guys, for being here. It's an honor to be able to talk in at these sessions. This subject in particular, I think it's very interesting because it's something people kind of fret. They're a little bit scared about making this move. It's essentially, if you see it from a granular level, it's essentially a change of career, going from developer to manager, team lead. So while you're still having opportunities to code, your whole focus on what you should be doing in your day to day is going to massively shift. And because of that, people tend to be a little bit afraid of it, but it's nothing that you should be afraid of. And we're going to get into it pretty soon. So let's give it a start. So like Amy June said, my name is Rolando Scott. I am from San Jose, Costa Rica. I've been working remotely with companies in the States for, I don't know, let's say 15 years now. I've worked with Drupal since Drupal 6, Drupal 7, Drupal 8 now, and all, 9. I'm the director of development at TOT Creative. It's a creative agency in Washington, D.C. We currently have around 35 developers. So I oversee the managers. We're divided into 6 teams. Each one has a manager. Each team has about 5 or 6 devs, and I manage the managers of those teams, basically. So I'm at the top of that pyramid. I'm also a volunteer firefighter, and that's something very dear to me, because it allows me to give back to the community in a different way. So that's a little bit about me. This session is for developers that are considering or they're being considered for managers or team leads. There's also for developers that have recently been promoted to managers or team leads, or managers or team leads that have been at the position for a little bit now, but they're still struggling to kind of understand and manage things correctly, right? So this is for everybody, and in the end, it is for everybody because we all have our own managers, right? And there's things we could learn here that we could kind of suggest to our managers if they're open for feedback, which they should. So, there you are. You're a great developer doing an amazing job at your company or your agency, and somebody says, "Hey, you've been doing such a great job. Why don't you be the manager, right?" And it's a really hard transition, right? Because you're not really sure if you will be a great manager. The traits that made you a really good developer are sometimes not useful as a manager, right? We've all heard of the syntax, right? Or ninja coder, or the guy that works 60 hours, 70 hours a week and does amazing things and puts out fires and all these things. Like they're very technical and they're great at problem solving code, right? that doesn't necessarily translate into being a good manager, being good with people, right? So it's really hard, to know if this great developer that you see will transition into being a great manager, right? So it's fine. It's fine to be scared, because it is hard, and not to put more gasoline in the fire, especially since I'm a firefighter. But once you become somebody's manager, you have more responsibility around that developer's happiness and motivation than anybody else in the company. There's 100 people in the company, but you will literally make or break that employee, and you can make things, or the environment great, or you can make them terrible for that person and make them want to leave. So there's that saying that people don't leave bad jobs, right? They leave bad managers, and that's true. I'm sure we've all had situations where maybe the job in itself, like what I'm doing, is fine. I can do it perfectly fine. The company is fine, but the person that is managing me is not a good person, or is not doing it in the correct way. So I'm looking for another job just because of that person, right? And the inverse is also true. Maybe the company is, not that good. Maybe the work that I do is not that fulfilling, but my manager is great and they make me feel awesome. They give me, a lot of time to learn. They make me a better person, a better coder, and I'll stay around because of that person, right? So it is hard. The transition is hard, and you now understand that you have a lot of responsibility riding on your hands, right? Um, I think the first thing that you need to understand when making this transition from manager to I'm sorry, from the developer to a manager, is that it's no longer about you, right? When you're a dev, when you're a senior developer, it's all about you. Like I am the best coder. I am, I can problem solve the best. I'm very good at these specific things. That's all great when you're a developer, but when you're a manager, that no longer matters. Like you don't want to be the best coder in the room. In fact, if you are the best coder in the room, that means that you're not doing the best of jobs as a manager. Like you need to make sure your team becomes better than you, or better than they are right now. There's that quote I put in there that true leaders don't create followers; they create more leaders. The way you create a leader is by giving them all the tools for them to grow as people first, and then grow from a technical perspective, right? The reason I say that it's no longer about you is that because you need to put your team's interests first and then your own, right? One way that I find that is really fulfilling, that you might think at the beginning, you might say, no, Rolando, that makes no sense, especially for a new manager trying to make the name for themselves, right? Is to make things in a way, frame things in a way where whenever your team does well, that win is your team's win. But whenever things go wrong, that's on you, right? So the way you talk about these things is very, very important. If somebody in your team did something good, let's say Mary, for example. Mary was able to fix an issue on a complex site, and it was great. And the whole team was able to work on something and advance on something because Mary did a great job. That is great. That is great. And that applies even if you were the one that kind of told Mary, hey, here's what you should be doing, right? Even if you were the person that kind of pushed them in the right direction, it's Mary's win and it's the team's win, right? But when things don't go well, right? um, it's 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 in your best interest to put that blame on yourself. It's best to say, oh, I didn't give Mary the best tools to solve this issue, or this is on me, because I didn't set up everybody for success, right? Your devs will thank you so much for it, because there's nothing worse than being, as they say, thrown under the bus, right? There's nobody wants to have that boss that when things go wrong, they immediately start pointing fingers, right? This will go a long way with, having your developers trust you and think the world of you, right? And also, as a manager, you do have some leeway of saying, hey, this isn't, things didn't go as well. Okay, but next time we'll make sure that they go better, right? So again, once you become a manager, it's no longer about you. You have to put your team's interest first, make sure everybody knows and sees when they do well, which obviously in the end is going to be a reflection on you as a manager, right? But you have to put your team's, you know, public appearance first, right? To make sure everybody feels good and make sure everybody knows that it was your team that did well. When things go wrong, you take the blame for it, you learn, and then you move on. That is very, very important. Let's talk a little bit about imposter syndrome, right? Because that was definitely one of the first feelings you're gonna feel once you become a manager. You're gonna think, maybe they made a mistake. Maybe they shouldn't have made me manager. Maybe I'm not ready for this. And you're gonna look across the aisle and maybe see other managers doing amazing things and their team's doing great. And you're gonna think, well, maybe I can't do that, right? Imposter syndrome is that voice inside your head that tells you that you aren't qualified, even when all the evidence points to the contrary. And it's the constant thought that you're faking everything and will eventually be found out as an imposter. I don't know a developer that hasn't felt this at some point in their career. I don't, I, This obviously happens in every industry, but I think development is very, um, this happens a lot in development just because there's so much to learn, right? You come into a new company and there's no way you know everything. There's no way you're on top of the latest technologies, right? So it's normal to feel this way, right? It's normal to see other people just clicking around and coding and doing amazing things, and you're like, I don't even know what you're talking about, right? It's super normal to feel this way, right? So, but we have to understand that if you are in this position as a manager, it's because somebody, probably your manager or somebody higher in the company, saw amazing traits that you have. They saw your potential. And maybe you're not the best manager today, but you will eventually be able to be one if you continue growing, if you do a good job, if you're focused enough to get there, right? And yes, you don't know everything today, but the important thing is you don't have to. You don't have to know everything today. You don't have to get everything perfect from day one. And we'll talk about this a little bit more in the next coming slides. I love this quote from Lori. Her Twitter handle is Lori on Tech. So, imposter syndrome is the cognitive dissonance to believe that everybody in the room is significantly smarter than you, yet they're not smart enough to figure out that you, the one that's not smart, have conned them into thinking you're smart. When you read it like that, when you understand the concept like that, you're like, yeah, this doesn't make any sense, right? If all the people around me are smarter than I am, they're gonna figure out if I'm conning them, right? If I'm not apt for this position. But since I'm here and somebody told me, hey, you are a manager now, you are a team lead, that means that people that are smart, figured you could do this. So you have to trust them, right? You definitely have to trust them that that's the case. Since we're on the on the topic of imposter syndrome, I always like to talk about some of the mistakes I've made in the past. Well, I say in the past. I mean, if by the past I mean this morning, then yes, this morning. Even as a senior, as a seasoned manager, we all make mistakes, and I think that's one of the most important lessons that you need to learn. That no one is expecting you, or no one should be expecting you to be perfect, right? This is a new position, this is a new job. Handling and managing and leading people is hard. So you're gonna make mistakes, and that's okay, right? It should be okay. So mistakes that I've made in the past, saying yes to everyone and everything. You are thrusted into this position of manager, and you now are getting requests that you weren't getting before. People are pinging you left and right to help them solve everything. Even weird requests that you didn't even know happened in the past, right? So an error is saying yes to everyone or everything, thinking that since you are in this position, you now have to, right? And that's not the case. Which leads me to the second point, not delegating or thinking I have to be the one that does everything. Delegating is hard, but it is key to being a good manager because you cannot be a good manager to your developers or to whoever you're leading if you are crazy busy doing everything, right? Also, people will feel that you don't trust them if you are, again, crazy busy doing everything. You need to be able to tell people in a kind, in a inspiring way, I need you to help me with this. I need you to do this. And also, going back to the first point, it's okay to say no sometimes. If you don't say no, people will continue to ask everything. We'll continue to put meetings at all times. I worked at an agency a long, long time ago that when I was promoted to the head of development, one of the project managers would put meetings at 11 o'clock at night. And yes, it was a crazy agency, and yes, that's not normal, but they would put meetings at 11 o'clock at night. And I thought that since I was just, I was the manager of the department, I had to go to them. So I would have meetings at 11 o'clock at night. And yes, this sounds crazy, but each situation is different, and I just felt compelled. I had to, right? And obviously, with experience, you see that you don't have to. You can say no, and you can try to make things better, right? And maybe not have meetings at 11 o'clock at night because that's just crazy, right? Another of the mistakes that I've made is not being patient. When you become a manager, you have this whole idea in your head of what you want your team to be, what you want your department to be. And turns out that as the higher you go, the slower some of those changes have to be. You can't, we had a situation in Toyota where at some point we had a manager that wanted to change the stack that we used and do something that was closer to what he was used to. And he just did that from one day to the other. And obviously, that created a lot of hassle because the developers didn't know the stack. We weren't going to learn how to do things from one day to the other. And, people got anxiety. They thought they were getting fired because they didn't know about this stack. They didn't know about this technology, right? So, as a manager, you want to do well, you want to implement changes, but they're not going to be as quick as you think they're going to be. That's the God's honest truth. Another mistake that I've made is hiring or promoting the wrong people. There's a saying that says, skills can be learned, but personality is harder. Like people are who they are, right? So with time, I've learned that it's better to hire somebody that seems to be a good cultural fit, somebody that won't come in and disrupt the group that you have. Um, but maybe isn't the strongest coder technically wise, because you can teach that. You can make him better. You can have sessions, and he can learn from the rest of the team, right? And you can have somebody be his mentor, and so you're actually doing two things at once because you're making this developer better, and you're also the person that is mentoring is also getting his first experiences in leading people as well. So it's better to promote or hire somebody that is a good cultural fit than somebody that's an amazing coder, but it's just going to create more issues or issues to your team. And lastly, this seems logical, but it happens. I sometimes forget to breathe. And it feels weird, but you want to do so much, and there's this stress, and everybody wants things to be done, and you have clients and stakeholders and managers and the other departments wanting things from you. Breathe, breathe. Thankfully, for the most part, I would assume no one here is a heart surgeon or or some sort of thing where if they slow down a bit, no one dies. Like at the end of the day, for the most part, we're creating websites, we're creating apps, right? It's not worth losing your life to stress about. It's not worth being so stressed out that you can't even sleep, that you can't even eat. Those are some of the situations that haven't occurred to me personally, but that I've heard other managers being so stressed out about their team and their projects and their work that they can't even sleep. And that's not what we should be striving for, right? So breathe. Even if things seem like you're overwhelmed and there's just so many things, breathing is a good thing to remember to do. One of the things that comes with being a manager is having access to more information that you did before you were a manager, right? When you were just a developer, right? So this additional information gives you more insight into the day-to-day operations of your agency, of your company, of other departments, of other things. Make sure you use this information correctly, right? Make sure you, when if at some moment you would have solved an issue just thinking, having the information that you had in hand as a developer, now that you're in a manager, you might understand why other departments do things, right? You might empathize, which is something we're going to talk about when another manager makes a decision that you don't agree with, right? Don't lose sight of this bigger picture. It's this additional information can only make you a better manager, and additional information can help your team do things better, right? So empathy. I want to stop for a second right here and ask you guys, what do you think empathy is, right? Because I think that's the hardest part. If you guys want to answer in the chat, I'd appreciate it. What is empathy, right? I think the hardest part about being a manager is not the added responsibility. It's not, I don't know, longer working out. I don't know. It's managing a people, right? Because there's a saying that says every brain, every head is a different world, right? So how I see things is usually not the same way that other people see things, right? So Amy June, understanding others' point of view. Bernardo says putting yourself on someone else's shoes. That is great. That's exactly it. We as managers have to empathize a lot with our team and with everybody in the department, but especially our team, because when you are trying to understand why people are reacting one way or another, or why they're doing this or that, you might think, well, that's just crazy. I would never do that. Yes, you would never do that. But you need to put yourself in that person's shoes, right? And try to understand before getting mad or before, thinking, oh, this person doesn't work or whatever. It's like, wait, try to see it from their perspective. As a manager, empathy is a very powerful tool that you need to have in order to, basically do anything with your team. Like you need, and it's going to help you promote happiness and empowerment between your developers, between your team. Um, Empathizing is one of the greatest tools a manager can do because it'll make the developer feel seen. It'll make them like, oh, my manager understands me. He understands why I make A and B solution, right? And it also will help a lot with conflict resolution. There's a statistic that says the employees in the United States spend approximately 2.8 hours each week involved in conflict. That's almost half a day a week in some sort of conflict that you as their managers are now in charge of finding a resolution, right? And hopefully those 2.8 hours aren't in conflict with you as their manager, right? They're in conflict with other departments or other developers. And now, it's your job to solve these type of conflicts, right? They can be very, superficial, somebody spoke to me weird, or I don't get that person's vibe, or they could have like really, intrinsic ramifications into that person's happiness, that person's idea of what their job should be, and empathizing with your developers is the way to start that conflict resolution. Trust, the way to empathize with people is to understand what they're feeling. And the only way to understand what they're feeling is to make sure people trust you, right? There's a weird or funny phenomenon that happens when you are made a manager of people that just, a couple of days ago were your peers. Because if you know, and everybody knows that we treat peers differently, right? If you we joke about different things. Maybe we are more honest about different things with your peers, right? And these developers might find it weird that just a second ago, you were that person, and now you're my manager. So now my relationship with you has to change. But it doesn't have to, right? It doesn't have to. Maybe from a professional point of view, it can, but from a personal point of view, you're still the same person, right? Another thing that happens is, people might find a little resentment because they feel that maybe they should have been made managers, right? They should have, or maybe they feel they're better coders than you are, so they have no idea why you were made tech lead or a manager, right? It's very important to gain people's trust, and the way of gaining people's trust is to be transparent. This whole slide that we went over about admitting mistakes is one of those things. If you as a manager shell out an image of saying that I am perfect and whatever I do is the correct thing to do, you will lose people's trust in a heartbeat. Like, people will see through that immediately and will say, "Oh no, this guy thinks he knows everything, but he doesn't. He keeps on making mistakes." It'll be more apparent when you make a mistake and you don't own up to it, right? So by putting your team first and making sure they're first in the wins, but taking the blame when something goes wrong, people will trust you because they'll know you won't throw them under the bus. You'll be able to be transparent, right? Because another thing that you have to do is you have to fight for your team. What does that mean? I mean, it's different in every company. It's different in every agency, but making sure that your team is good. Making sure that people have this. I always tell my developers that there's two images of them as developers: what I know about them as developers, if they're good or bad, and what the rest of the company knows of them, right? If they think they're good developers, if they think they take a lot of time, you have to fight to make sure your team is seen in a great way, right? It's seen in a way where people want to work with them, and they're agreeable, they're good to work with, right? And in the same light, you kind of need to shield them from what they don't need to know or see. Again, you as a manager will know more information, and you have to filter that information, because if they got bad feedback, but it's not really actionable, but it'll make them feel really bad, you can kind of decide if you're going to filter that a little bit, if you're going to change that in a way where it is constructive criticism instead of just somebody dragging somebody else down. Shield them from what they don't need to see, and make sure they think they trust you and that you're transparent. Feedback. Feedback is super important. As a manager, you not only need to be giving feedback, but you need to be receiving feedback. It's the only way that if you're doing a good job or not. There will be other ways. If your team does well, if their projects go well, then that's a reflection on you. But that direct feedback is important when you give it and when you receive it. And feedback needs to be actionable. Like, if you're telling me I'm doing something wrong, please tell me how to fix that, right? You need to tell people this, and they need to tell that to you, and also fair, right? It's important that feedback be fair, because you can't put in if you have favoritisms, which also always happens, right? It's normal human behavior. It's not fair that I give different feedback to different devs under the same situation, right? They'll eventually find out, and it's just going to cost you more issues. So feedback giving and receiving should always be actionable and fair. For this, one-on-ones are crucial, right? Different companies have different, ideas of what a one-on-one should be. But in general, there's this one moment during the week or every 2 weeks where you sit down with one of your developers, or one of the people you manage, and you have, ranging from 30 minutes to an hour conversation with them. The first thing I would do is never move or cancel them unless you really have to. As a manager, like, you're really crazy busy, and people put meetings, and you have deadlines, and you have work of your own, right? It's very easy to fall back into, "Oh no, I'll talk to them next week. Everything is fine," right? You don't know that. You might assume everything is fine, but you don't know if your developer really needs to talk to you about something. And this is the only chance you're going to get, because next week they'll forget, and then it's just one of those things that start accumulating, and then when you figure out, it's like, "Oh well, we never talked about it," right? You need to plan for them. Having an agenda is a great idea. Obviously, having space for your developer to, next 10 minutes, what do you want to talk about? Is there anything bothering you? And one of the things that I always tell my managers when they're doing their one-on-ones is to mix in personal questions. Like, we want to know who this person is. We don't work with robots, right? We don't like, I care that my developers know how to code, but I also care that they're feeling well, right? That they don't have any situation. Or if, if I had a great developer that all of a sudden is dropping the ball on projects, it's weird, right? That's not who he is. And I'm not just gonna go off on him and say, hey, you're dropping balls and all your projects are going wrong because without trying to understand what's going on, right? So with getting to know these people and mixing personal questions, I know, oh, my mom was sick. Oh, well, okay, that explains a lot, right? Because now, as a manager, what can I do to help you? Do you need some time off? Do I need to take you off some projects so the stress is a little bit less? But I need to know this, and one-on-ones are crucial to knowing this and getting to know your people. Another factor that shouldn't never go away, no matter what stage your developers are in or the people you manage, is training and learning. No one knows everything. And I think that's an understatement. And, there's a thing where you can say, well, Rolando, that's obvious, but people tend to forget about that sometimes, especially if they've been at the company for a long time, right? Training and learning is great because it motivates people, right? It makes them feel like, oh, my company is investing in me, right? So any opportunity that you can as a manager to get people to train or learn new things is a golden opportunity. It makes them better developers, right? Which is what we all want, but it also makes them better people, which again is good because that makes your job easier as a manager, right? There's going to be less conflicts. They'll learn how to mediate and work out conflicts on their own. There's a bunch of things. So training and learning is something that you should never ever ever stop doing. Another thing that is really really important, and it's one of the things managers struggle most at the beginning, is finding time for yourself. It is so important. When I've seen it when we promote somebody to manager, they are overwhelmed with the amount of things they are now in charge. Like, they have to manage 5 or 6 developers. They're now in charge of certain initiatives. They have project managers coming to them left and right with problems from their developers. They now know that they have a higher level overview of some projects that are in trouble, so they want to participate in these projects and try to make sure they go well. But at the end of the day, most managers also have their work to do, and you need to carve out time. If you let people control your schedule, you are doomed to have really, sucky work days is the best way I could describe it. I have this thing where, it used to happen to me a lot where people would put meetings and there would be like 30 minutes times in between. And I don't really like that because in those 30 minutes, I can't really get anything done code wise. Like, I can start to kind of, wrap my head around the problem. And when I'm actually focusing, oh, next meeting. So I try to group meetings together so I can have, all my meetings in the morning and then, me time in the afternoon so I can actually code. Or, not everybody has their own same system, but the important thing is you need to work, you need to have time for yourself to do your own things. And everybody needs to understand that it's fine, that it's okay to have and want this time. Like, you need, even as a manager, even as in my position as a director, I like to do freelance work outside, so I never forget how to code. Because if you stop coding and you're just a manager, pretty soon, your skills as a coder are going to start falling behind. And we all know that there's something new being invented every day. There's some new framework, there's some new method of doing something. So it's important for you to keep coding and keep learning, right? That's even for your own satisfaction, your own knowledge. And it's super important for managers to never stop that. And lastly, what I need you guys to understand that it's never perfect, right? It's never perfect. There will always be things that you can do better. There will always be things that um, that you guys can grow on. And even when, when you feel that you have had like a terrible day and everything went wrong and you just didn't do your work correctly, tomorrow's another day, right? Tomorrow's another opportunity to get started on something new, to do something better. And as long as you're moving forward, even if it's in baby steps, that's still forward progress, right? And that's what you want. That's what you want of yourself. That's what you want of your devs. If you're patient enough, they will get better in certain things. The only thing you really want them to see is forward progress, even if it's little by little. So, this is a quick overview on some of the challenges that are faced by managers. I would love to take any questions. If you have any examples, any stories that you would want to talk about, I'm more than happy to talk about. While you guys type, I'm just going to tell you a quick story I had about a situation that happened this week. We at Teoti are recently implementing the position that is called tech lead. Tech lead in Teoti terms is a developer that is on the project from beginning to end, right? Um, there is we didn't used to do this. A couple years ago, developers would be put on projects once the design was completely done and finalized and approved by the client. So we didn't have a say into the design. We didn't, like, if there were red flags, it was way too late because the client had already signed off on the design. No one understood the importance of having a developer in the project from the beginning. Now we've instituted that change, and we have this role of a tech lead that is on the project from the very beginning, even from selling it all the way to the end. So while the project is in discovery, while it's in doing the content audits and the technical audits, all of that is on the tech lead now. One of the project managers hasn't been really able to change, or to accept this change, right? And isn't pulling in this tech lead developer during all the times that they need to be pulled in, right? So the tech lead came to me because this person felt really bad that she was dropping the ball on the project, but it's because she didn't have visibility into what was going on, right? So, one of the first things I did was talk to the project manager and try to empathize with them, right? I didn't go directly and say, hey, why aren't you doing this? You have to do this, right? I'm trying to understand what's going on through their head and trying to understand, like, why aren't you roping in your tech lead? So talking, it turns out that this tech lead is primarily a front-end developer, and the project manager thought that since this person was a front-end developer, that maybe this person wasn't going to have enough insight to help with the tech audit and all those other things. But she is like this tech lead has the knowledge, right? So at the end of the day, what was a big conflict because they started being a little bit passive aggressive on the Slack channel, like, hey, you didn't tell me about this, and the other one's like, yeah, you don't know about this, all these types of conflict and issues. I sat them in the same Zoom room, and we got to talking, and the project manager discovered that, yeah, it's not because of you as a person, it's just I didn't think you knew about these things. And then I got the tech lead to understand that it wasn't personal, right? There was just miscommunication, and now they're working correctly on the project. So those are examples of everyday examples of what you're going to have to do, of trying to solve conflicts and trying to make sure people do their best job, um, by just talking and empathizing, and not getting mad, and not going against the project manager, not going against the tech lead and say, well, it's your job, you have to make sure you do it, and you have to figure out a way, right? Being the bridge in this discussion is an inherent part of being a manager. Books, yes, books. There's an author called, I don't know how to pronounce her last name. I think it's Sarah Drasner. Yeah, it's Sarah Drasner. She has an upcoming book. She has I follow her on Twitter a lot, and she has a book called Engineering Management for the Rest of Us. The book, I'm going to put the link right here. Um, I mean, she is great. She talks a lot. She has, her blog has a lot of topics regarding engineering management. Um, and, I don't know, it's just, she's so coherent and she empathizes so much with people that all her blogs are very much aligned to the views I have. So that book is almost coming out. It looks like a beautiful book. Like the illustration on it is amazing, and some of the chapters are available in her blog, so you guys can take a look at her blog, and if you like what the chapters say, then once the book comes out, that'll be a great book for learning engineering management. What's your recommendation if your customer directly reaches out to your developer instead of the lead? Sure, this happens from time to time. There are clients that are really hands-on. I think, depending on how you want to approach the situation, or how your agency does things, right? Because there are SOPs, right? For example, in Coyote, normally clients do not talk to the normal dev a lot. It's either the project managers or the tech leads. I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but that's what we try to strive for. But when they do, make sure you reach out to the client and tell them that, at least CC me on this, or if you have a question, feel free to come to me. Don't make it in a way where the client feels they're getting yelled at for what they did. Just in a way like, hey, these are the rules and this is how we work. If you want to have this communication with the developer, and you as a lead trust this developer to do that, then by all means, yeah, sure. Just make sure you're CC'd on it so things aren't happening without you knowing. And then also talk to the developer and tell them, I'm not doing this because I don't trust you, right? I'm doing this because this is my job and I want to make sure you're supported. And maybe the client's going to ask a question that you don't know, so I'll be there to back you up, right? Make sure the developer doesn't feel like you're, pulling the winds out of their sails by reaching out and telling the client, hey, you need to talk to me, right? Make sure they don't feel bad about it. I think we're almost at time. Any other questions, examples, stories that you guys want to talk about? I know we've all had bad managers and good managers, so take a lot of your life experiences. Be the manager you wish you had at different times in your career, and just by keeping that in your brain, it'll help you make the right decisions in a ton of situations. Cool. So if we don't have any other questions or thank you. I don't know if I'm pronouncing your name right, Mdad, but thank you for the comment. Um, again, I'm going to leave. Well, my information is there if you guys want to reach out in LinkedIn, if you guys want to reach out in Twitter. I'm not really that social, but if you guys reach out, I'll be more than happy to respond about any specific situation you guys have. Yes, I can definitely share the slide deck. I will. Wonder if I can do that right now. Let's see. Let me stop. Oh, before we do go, I'll put the link in a second. Just wanted to say thank you. And what's coming up next? Amy June, I don't know if you want to talk about this, or should I?
I can. Put my glasses on. See. So up next, there's a little bit of a break. So walk around, do some networking, get yourself something to drink. And then at the top of the hour, we're going to have a raffle. No, at the top of the hour, we're going to do lightning talks. And lightning talks are super fun. You have something you want to say, you have something you want to advertise, you want to give a shout out, you have a little technical thing, a little non-technical thing. You get in line, you talk for 5 minutes, we cart you off and the next person comes up. And then directly after the lightning talks, we'll do a raffle where we're giving away some Drupalize Me stuff and some JetBrains products. And then we'll take a break. And then if you are local in Asheville tonight, they do have a party at Highland Brewery. If you are online and want to hang out, we've also created a virtual happy hour at 6:30. And if you go to the website on the social tab, there'll be a Zoom link there. And we invited some external people outside of Asheville too. Like we have a channel in Drupal Slack called Drupal Happy Hour, I think is what it is. And whenever we have a meetup after a camp, we post in there. So we get all sorts of different people coming in from that. So, yep. And then, also, if you're in person, there's a hike tomorrow to Catawba Falls, and that's information's on the website as well. And I think that's a spectacular community activity because you can bring your loved ones too. So thank you, Rolanda, for a great talk.
Thank you, guys. It's been an honor to present in Asheville, and hope if we do it live and not virtual, I can make it next year and we can meet up. So thank you guys again for your attention. If you have any questions, any doubts, any things you want to talk about, just feel free to reach out.